What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It is time to give you my upset alert games heading into week number 5 of the 2024 college football season. Before I get into my upset alert games for this weekend, let's go back to my upset alert games from last week. In the video, we had a couple of upsets happen. We had Illinois upset Nebraska. That was on the video in the most likely category, so that game ended up being an upset. Illinois pulling off the upset there against the Cornhuskers. And then we saw Michigan upset USC, and that was on the video, of course, from last week. So we had a couple of upsets, after a really quiet week in week number 3. We saw, more upsets, of course, after last week. So going into week 5, we could probably see more upsets happen, or we could get a couple again, just like what we did last week. And we have a bunch of big games coming up this weekend, and how this upset alert video works. Again, I give you 8 games total, 4 games each. 4 games that are least likely to be upsets, and then 4 games that are most likely to be upsets. And in order for me to call it an upset alert type game, the spread has to be in single digits in order to call it an upset alert type game. And again, I just do top 25 versus top 25 matchups, and then also top 25 versus unranked matchups. And whoever that highest ranked top 25 team is, that team, of course, is on upset alert for this weekend. So let's go ahead and get right into it with my upset alert video heading into week 5. And we will start from the least likely and work my way up to the most likely category. So we'll start here with the least likely category first. So first up, we got Virginia Tech and Miami. This game will be at 7:30 Eastern time on Friday. This is a Friday night game on a weeknight game. Miami's favored by 19 in this one, and the over and under is at 55.5. Not really surprised that Miami is favored by a big margin this one. You look at Miami, I think this is clearly a really good team based off of the first 4 weeks of the season. They're 4-0. You look at, Cam Ward, the, quarterback and everything for the Hurricanes. I mean, he might be the best quarterback in the country right now. 14 touchdown passes and then a couple of interceptions, so he's taking care of the football pretty well. Miami's coming off that big win over South Florida after a pretty slow start in the first half, but they ended up pulling away and winning that one like 50-15. So Miami is definitely a really explosive offensive team, and they also have a pretty good defense just based off of what I've seen here in the first 4 weeks. Virginia Tech, on the other hand, a big disappointment in my opinion for them, and a disappointing start to the season. This is a Virginia Tech team that I was really high on, and also picking them to be like a dark horse team with all the experience coming back. Now, don't get me wrong, on these Friday night games, we've seen some upsets happen, so you never know. Miami probably could get, upset in this game, but I don't really think that's going to happen. I think Miami definitely will go out there and take care of business, but I could be wrong. Virginia Tech might prove me wrong in this game. If Miami kind of, makes those, mistakes that they've been doing in the last couple years under Mario Cristobal, maybe Miami loses this game. But, I think the Hurricanes definitely will win this one, and I don't really think an upset is going to happen here in this one. But again, in these weeknight games, we've seen a lot of upsets happen in the ACC. Just like last week, we saw, Stanford upset Syracuse. I mean, that wasn't on the video, and it was an unranked matchup. But, Syracuse, lost that game. And Syracuse definitely looked like a top 25 team, and also definitely a dark horse contender. So, yeah, that game, it could likely happen in this one. You never know, but I'm going to go with Miami here. And again, I don't really expect an upset here to happen. And again, this game will be at 7:30 Eastern time here on Friday night. And again, the Hurricanes are favored by 19. Next up, we got Kentucky versus Ole Miss at noon Eastern time on Saturday on ABC. Ole Miss favored by 17.5 points, and the over and under is at 52.5. We kind of waited for Ole Miss to kind of play a tough competition. This will kind of be their first real test of the season. They're ranked number 6 here in the AP poll at 4-0. I don't really know how good this team is just yet, but, the offense is very explosive. Jackson Dart's been off to a really good start to the season as well. He might be a Heisman candidate just like Cam Ward is. He might be second right now behind Cam Ward, but, defensively, I kind of want to see how Ole Miss defense does here in this game against Kentucky. Kentucky is a team that's been pretty average so far. They've been up and down in the first 4 weeks of the season. This game right here kind of decides if Kentucky is going to be like a really bad team the rest of the way, or if they're going to be able to kind of make it to a bowl game if they win this game. But, Kentucky, they've been pretty average. Lost to South Carolina in week number 2. They got blown out in that game 31-6, but they were competitive against Georgia a couple weeks ago. Does Kentucky come out really competitive in this one? I think they do, but Ole Miss definitely with the home field advantage. It's definitely going to be tough here for the Wildcats to win, and I think the game plan for Kentucky to win this one is definitely going to have to run the football in order to kind of slow this slow this game down and keep that Ole Miss offense off the field for as long as possible. But the Rebels are big favorites in this one. It wouldn't really shock me though if Kentucky definitely pulled off the upset, but I think Ole Miss definitely clearly is a more talented team, but we'll see how good this team really is coming up this weekend. So I got Ole Miss and Kentucky here at noon Eastern time on ABC. Next up is Wisconsin versus USC. This game will be at 3:30 Eastern time on CBS. USC favored by 14.5, and the over and under is at 50.5. Wisconsin coming off a pretty tough loss to Alabama a couple weeks ago. They have a bye week, of course, this past weekend in order to kind of recover from that game. They lose Tyler Van Dyke, though, a couple weeks ago to injury in that game against Alabama, so that's definitely a huge loss here for the Badgers. USC, on the other hand, how do they bounce back here after a loss to Michigan from last weekend, even though they only lost that game by 3? I think USC probably bounces back here, but the question is, are they all beat up from that Michigan game because it was a really physical game? I mean, Michigan definitely ran the football a lot here in this one against that USC defense. Do we think the USC defense is a little beat up after, Michigan ran the football down their throats? I really don't know. That's a big question mark as they go into this game against Wisconsin. It probably is a trap game here to start out the year for the Trojans, but we still don't know how good this team is. They were competitive, though, against Michigan. They beat LSU in week number 1, so we kind of need one more game to kind of figure out how good USC is. If Wisconsin loses this game, then they probably will be a disappointment once again, and it's just not been a really good start for the Badgers either. They had a couple of games where they only won by a couple of touchdowns, and then, of course, got blown out by Alabama. So we'll see how Wisconsin looks in this game, but again, USC here is favored by a big margin at 14.5. I don't really expect an upset here to happen because the Trojans definitely are a more better team than Wisconsin. Plus, they have the home field advantage, but this game will be at 3:30 Eastern time on CBS, and we'll find out if USC can recover after that loss to Michigan. And then finally, the last game here in the least likely upset alert category, it's Illinois and Penn State. This game will be at 7:30 Eastern time on NBC. Penn State favored by 17.5. That's a really big spread there for an undefeated matchup here between two top 20 teams. And the over-under is at 47.5. So we're not kind of expecting a lot of points to be scored in this one. You look at Illinois, they've been a big surprise so far in the first 4 weeks. They have a win over Kansas a couple weeks ago. That's not a really good win for the Fighting Illini, though, because the Jayhawks have not been really good so far in the first half of the year. But Illinois is a top 25 team. They have really surprised me a lot. They're 4-0 heading into this Penn State game. They beat Nebraska, of course, this past weekend on the road. So this is back-to-back road games here for Illinois. If they can pull off another upset here in another tough environment, this Illinois team becomes a real big contender in the Big Ten. As of right now, I'd say they're a dark horse team. And they're definitely that top dark horse team in the Big Ten as of right now because they're ranked in the top 25. And then Penn State here, on the other hand, they had a bye week, of course, a couple weeks ago. They beat Kent State pretty easily, one of the worst teams in the country right now. Penn State's undefeated at 3-0. We'll definitely kind of figure out how good Penn State is this weekend. Are they really good on the offensive side of the football? Has the offense kind of changed up things? Or is the defense going to have to step up? I mean, that's a really big question mark. But, again, the over and under is at 47.5, so we're not expecting a lot of points to be scored. And this game is a night game. It's going to be a really tough environment here for Illinois to win at. And I think Penn State's going to come out really fired up in this one because Illinois definitely is like a trap game here for the Nittany Lions. But again, Penn State and Illinois, this game at 7:30 Eastern time. Again, Penn State's favored by 17.5. I'm kind of surprised that this is not an upset alert type game. But either way, I wouldn't really be shocked here if Illinois goes on the road and beats Penn State here. It would not shock me whatsoever. And just based off of the first 4 weeks, I think Illinois is a pretty good team. And we'll see how good they are actually going into this game as well against Penn State. Those are my least likely upset alert games. Let's now get into the most likely category here. The most likely upset alert games heading into the 5th weekend of the college football season. And we will start here with the Big 12. Oklahoma State and Kansas State. This game will be at noon Eastern time on ESPN. Kansas State favored by 6, and the over and under is at 55.5. Both of these teams coming off really tough losses this past weekend. You look at Oklahoma State, they lost by 3 against Utah. You know, Alan Bowman gets benched in the third quarter. I still think that was a really bad decision there by Mike Gundy to, bench Alan Bowman in that third quarter and then make him come back out there in the fourth quarter, even though they were trailing like 22-3. I think if Alan Bowman stayed in the game in the second half, I think Oklahoma State definitely would be like 4-0 right now, and they probably would be that front runner in the Big 12. But, either way, it was a decision that Mike Gundy had to make, and it is what it is. But, Oklahoma State and Kansas State are pretty similar teams. The Wildcats coming off that really brutal loss to BYU this past weekend. On the road, how did they bounce back here after a brutal loss? They're all beat up after that game. I really don't know. But, both of these teams are pretty beat up from last week's games. Oklahoma State's pretty beat up after getting all, knocked out of the mouth, of course, against Utah's defense. And then Kansas State obviously just really did not play that well against BYU. So that's a big question mark here for both of these teams going into this game this weekend. This game probably decides who has a chance to probably meet Utah in the Big 12 championship. It's still early in the season. We don't really know how good these teams are. But, based off of what's happened so far, Oklahoma State and Kansas State, this is kind of like a battle here for that second place spot here in the Big 12. So we'll see what happens in this one. I think it will be a very competitive game. And I would not be shocked here if Oklahoma State actually wins this one. And I also wouldn't be really shocked here if Kansas State pulled off the upset. But again, this game will be at noon Eastern time here on ESPN. And again, the Wildcats favored by 6. Moving on, we got Louisville versus Notre Dame. This game will be at 3:30 Eastern time on Peacock. It's actually going to be on Saturday, not on September 21st. This game on Peacock, so I can't watch this game. You can't really watch it either if you don't have the Peacock channel. Notre Dame's favored by 6.5, and the over and under is at 48.5. Louisville, we don't really know much about them just yet. They've only played 3 games, but they beat Georgia Tech, a pretty solid Georgia Tech team from last weekend, 31-19. So, Louisville definitely has to have a big win here in order to kind of, be like a dark horse team or still become that top contender in the ACC. And then Notre Dame here at number 16 in the AP poll. Notre Dame, has been a pretty up and down team so far. They lost to Northern Illinois in week number 2. They beat Texas A&M in week number 1. Last week, I should say in week 3, they beat Purdue like 66-7. And then last weekend, they beat Miami of Ohio Redhawks, University Redhawks, like 31-19 or maybe like 31-17 if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, Notre Dame kind of struggled in the first half against Miami of Ohio. I think it's because they probably overlooked Miami of Ohio just a little bit and were overlooking them and probably overlooking them to this Louisville game. So, yeah, I think Notre Dame's going to come out really fired up. Obviously, Louisville has Louisville hasn't really played a tough competition yet. They played Georgia Tech last week, kind of like a first real test. But this is their first road game of the season. So, yeah, this will be a really tough test here for the Cardinals. But, again, this game at 3:30 Eastern time on Peacock. And, again, it's on Saturday, not September 21st. Messed up my graphic there. So, yeah, Louisville and Notre Dame at 3:30 Eastern time on Saturday. Next up, we got Arkansas versus Texas A&M, 3:30 Eastern time as well on ESPN. The Aggies favored by 3.5, and the over and under is at 52.5. Both of these teams come in at 3-1. Arkansas, obviously, coming off that big win, of course, against Auburn last weekend. Can they continue this momentum after that game against Auburn and beat Texas A&M here in Arlington? Texas A&M on the other side, they're ranked number 24 in the AP poll. Texas A&M, is pretty similar to Arkansas. In fact, both of these teams are pretty similar. They're both 3-1. Arkansas lost to a Power 4 team in Oklahoma State a couple of weeks ago, or I should say like 3 weeks now. They lost that game in overtime. And then Texas A&M lost to Notre Dame in week number 1. So both of these teams are pretty similar in losses. But, I think both of these teams are pretty even. This is a really tough one, to predict and everything. I will make predictions for this game coming up tomorrow and everything, but I'm going to have to make a, decision here. But I would not be shocked here if Arkansas actually pulled off the upset here. Texas A&M is a pretty good team, especially on the defense, but this will be Arkansas's kind of, first real defense defense that they'll go up against. Again, Texas A&M has a really good defense, but again, Arkansas, they have a really good offense, so both of these teams are pretty similar. But again, Texas A&M versus Arkansas, this one should be a pretty good one. Again, the Aggies are favored, but I wouldn't really be shocked here if Arkansas pulled off the upset. So this game at 3:30 Eastern Time on ESPN. And then finally, we stay in the SEC. Our final game on Upset Alert, that's Georgia versus Alabama at 7:30 Eastern Time on ABC. Georgia favored by 1.5 points here in this one, and the over and under is at 48.5. Both of these teams coming out of bye weeks from this past weekend. They're both 3-0 and ranked in the top 5 in the AP poll. How does Georgia bounce back after a really flat performance against Kentucky, a couple weeks ago? I think they'll come out really fired up in this one, but it's their second tough road game of this season, but this will be their really first big test on the road. I mean, it's a very tough place to play at Bryant-Denny Stadium in Alabama. Alabama, we don't really know much about them either. They're coming off that win against Wisconsin a couple weeks ago. That's just a really solid win for them, but this is really both of these teams' first real test of the season. Even though Georgia had a really tough test against Kentucky a couple weeks ago, I think this is definitely their biggest test so far of the year, and this is also a game that probably could decide who makes the SEC championship going forward. But both of these teams, again, are ranked in the top 5. I would not be shocked here if Alabama pulled off the upset. I mean, Alabama is still Alabama. I mean, they've beaten Georgia, of course, in several occasions, in SEC championships and the national championships. And then Georgia obviously beat Alabama in the national championship 3 years ago. So, yeah, this one should be a pretty good one. Georgia and Alabama at 7:30 Eastern Time. College game day, of course, going to be down here for this one. So get ready for this one. Buckle your seatbelts. It's going to be a really good game. And, again, both of these teams are pretty even, in my opinion. So that's my upset alert games heading into week number 5 of the 2024 college football season. Let me guys know what you think about these games. Who do you see getting upsetted this weekend? Let me know down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.